Nigeria's far-reaching reform package, which includes further privatization plans and new incentives for investors, will be the key focus in a new report that is coming out in 2017. The report, Nigeria 2017, will shine a spotlight on the country's long-term strategy for boosting oil output, which will be steered by a major overhaul of the regulatory framework governing the sector. My name is Hyde, and this is My Worst Day on Forbes Africa TV. Nigeria's plans for shifting the economy away from reliance of hydrocarbons for export revenues and driving growth across its industrial sector, especially at its free zones, have necessitated major legislative and regulatory changes. While external pressures and domestic challenges remain problematic, Nigeria's strong fundamentals and abundance of resources make it an attractive prospect for investors, and one legal mind has been instrumental in driving the narrative. Let's take a look at who he is. Gbenga Oyebode, MFR, born the 30th of March 1959, is one of the founding partners and chairman, management board of Aluko and Oyebode. A lawyer by profession, he specializes in advising major corporations on matters relating to oil and gas, power, foreign direct investment, privatization, telecommunications, project finance, and aviation. Oyebode had his secondary school education at Christ School, after which he proceeded to study law at the University of Ife, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Law LLB degree in 1979. And he was admitted as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 1980. He went on to obtain Master of Law LLM degree at the University of Pennsylvania in 1982. Oyebode co-founded Aluko and Oyebode with Bankole Olumide Aluko, and is currently the chairman of CFAO Yamamoto Nigeria Limited and Okumu Oil Palm PLC. He also serves on the board of MTN Nigeria Communications Limited and Nestle Nigeria PLC. He is on the Africa Advisory Committee of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, as well as a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Oyebode is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, the American Bar Association, and the International Bar Association. In 2001, Oyebode was conferred with the Nigerian National Honor, Member of the Order of the Federal Republic of Nigeria by the Nigerian government, and he also holds the Belgian Royal Honor of Knight of the Order of the Leopold. Welcome to another episode of My Worst Day, and joining us today we have one of the most distinguished legal minds in Nigeria, Mr. Gbenga Oyebode. Thank you for joining me on My Worst Day.
Thank you.
Now let's begin with the definition. I mean, your reputation precedes you, but the man behind all the accolades, can you please tell us who is Mr. Gbenga Oyebode?
Well, Gbenga Oyebode lives in Lagos. I was actually born in London, but came to Nigeria very early on in my life. Essentially grew up in Kano and in Lagos. Went to university at the University of Ife, and then proceeded to the US. Did my postgraduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and came back to Nigeria soon thereafter. Set up a law firm and practice law. That's what I do. That's my passion. Maybe the only other thing about me is that I come from easily what I think is one of the smallest Yoruba states, Ekiti. And Ekiti people are known for two things. One's education, the other thing is eating pounded yam. But really, that's me.
Okay. I'm sure you're obviously you're very educated. What about the pounded yam?
I promise you, if you eat pounded yam from Ekiti, you won't, that's all you'll eat. We are great lovers of our yams. So we eat boiled yam in the morning, we eat fried yam in the evening, we eat pounded yam for lunch.
Sounds like my kind of state. Now, you're currently the managing partner of Aluko and Oyebode. but your legal career spans a number of years in the Nigerian sector. Now, talk to us about your journey.
Well, look, very early on, when I practiced law, when I graduated, I decided that one of the things I wanted to do was to learn from the best and the brightest. Mm-hmm. So going off to the United States was a great experience for me, very early 80s. I decided that not only was I going to do postgraduate school, but essentially I was going to get admitted to practice in New York, for instance. So I worked at White & Case in New York, and essentially for me that was a great experience. It was trying to understand how you ran huge law firms, essentially name partners that had since passed on, but had handed over these great law firms to partners to grow. And for me, it was like, how can we replicate this in Nigeria? And so very quickly thereafter, I came back to Nigeria and decided that I needed to set up a law firm. And not just set up a law firm, but essentially set one up for which it was really about a partnership. A partnership that was going to be an institution, one that there was going to be legacy, one in which the legacy was not necessarily that my children would take over, which is essentially what we'd had in Nigeria, where there were family-owned law firms. So today, what am I proud about? I'm proud about the fact that we do have a law firm that's sustaining. We have a law firm where I have sort of stepped back from the practice today. I'm chairman of the law firm. I continue to do work, but the firm today is more than just Gbenga Oyebode. It is a firm that is the biggest Nigerian law firm. We do cross-border work across the continent. We rank amongst the best law firms on the continent. We have relationships with some of the largest law firms in the world. And so that's that reputation that I always intended to develop, and I'm happy that we have it today.
Now, I've noticed a very interesting thing about you is you have a very strong corporate affiliation with some of the leading brands of our time. Now, from Nestle to Access and now CFAO. How did that side also develop, and what role do you actually play in these numerous organizations?
I think, look, it's important that as a corporate lawyer, what you tend to develop is relationships with clients. The longer those relationships exist for, the more confident and comfortable clients are with their advisors. Lawyers have a very unique role in corporate life. You know, you advise boards, you advise CEOs, you advise corporates about changes in law, about sometimes really just about policy changes in the country. One of the things that I tend to think I bring to the table is a very sound understanding of what we call business judgment. So that my role is not necessarily giving purely legal advice. It's also about saying to people, this is what I think exists in this market. If you had to make a call, a business judgment, you know, who would you rather have advising you? And what has transpired over the years is that I think most corporates that I sit on their boards or that use our firm tend to look at me for more of a business judgment with respect to operations in the country. You know, what are the things that they need to, you know, operating in Nigeria is particularly difficult, and therefore that's what I bring to the table across the board with multinationals that operate here and with Nigerian corporates.
As a lawyer, you definitely are no stranger to setbacks. But your job is usually to help people to get out of trouble. But when you reflect on your personal career, let me ask you, what has been your worst day in business?
Well, look, you know, my worst day in business essentially is something intensely personal. My partner, Bankole Aluko, who was senior advocate of Nigeria, passed on very suddenly in February 2002. So it's not, if I had to think about it, is it a business failure? Is it essentially it was intrinsically personal to me.
Yeah.
The fact that a named partner, somebody who was not just my friend, but also my business partner, you know, you wake up one morning and you hear that he's ill. rather, in actual fact, not an illness that was particularly serious, something that we expected him to pick up and move on from. But 2 days later, he passed on. It was at a very crucial part of our existence. We'd spent time building the firm, spent time building the reputation of the firm. He had recently become Senior Advocate of Nigeria, which is the Nigerian equivalent of the English QC, a very prestigious honor in our society. We expected that in itself will drive significant growth in the firm. We expected that finally, on the litigation side of our practice, because we expected to build a full-service law firm, the litigation side of our practice would essentially be where we wanted it to be. We did great corporate work and we did great litigation work, but the firm was meant to be a full-service law firm. And then all of a sudden, he's no longer around. So it was a significant setback for the firm. Significant setback personally for me, because this was somebody that I had known pretty much almost all my life. But then the signals that I sent to all of the people that worked with us, for me was really to say to them, you know what, Bankole would have liked us to succeed. He would have liked us to continue building the firm. He would have liked to look back and say the legacy was the firm, the existence of the firm, the success of the firm, the growth of the firm. And very quickly, I called everybody together and I said, you know what, guys, we need to do this, not necessarily just for us, but for him, so that we have a sustaining legacy, so that the name of the firm, people will look back today and say, who's the Aluko in the Aluko and Oyebode? And we can then turn around and say, you know what, passed on under really sorry circumstances, except though that the legacy persists.
So leading up to this unfortunate event, how long had you been in a relationship?
Oh, no. We'd actually had the law firm at that point. We'd actually had the law firm for about 10 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't, this wasn't a new relationship, and I'd known him essentially for maybe.
So speak to me about the relationship prior to even getting into business. Then were you?
Oh no, well, I like to tell people that, you may have 180 million Nigerians, but in terms of the sort of communities and the networks that we all live in, it's actually much smaller than that. Yeah. So while Bankole went to the University of Lagos and I was in the University of Ife, where we had actually grown up in the same circles, had known each other, and had kept in touch with each other before we became partners, but more importantly, had developed as true professionals in the different things that we did. And so when he essentially joined the firm and became a named partner of the firm, the reality for me was that, it was a culmination of all these things that we had done together, and socially, professionally. It was a recognition of the fact that we had identified that, this two named partners of a law firm who essentially had a vision. And what was that vision? Building a great law firm. And so for me, the shame was him not being around to see that firm, that great law firm that we wanted to build together happen. But the reality of it today is that that firm, that brand, the name of the firm, is one that is now well known across the continent.
Extremely reputable.
And I think that for me is the legacy, and that in itself gives me tremendous satisfaction.
When you reflect back to the working relationship that you had with Aluko, what was that like?
Oh, it was great. As I said, trying to build a full-service law firm required us bringing people who did corporate work, who did litigation. So I had strong corporate skills, he had strong litigation skills. Except that, in doing these things, these are really different disciplines, if I put it that way. But the very fact that we understood that that was the intention meant that we were then able to bring on board people that we thought would be able to assist us. And to give you an example, over the last 20 years, most of our partners today in the firm are people who joined us in those early years. And so, again, gives me tremendous satisfaction that most of our partners in the firm today also worked with him at that time, and so are able to share in the vision, are able to share in the experience. And so we can look back and look back and say to ourselves that, look, you know what we planned, we achieved. but we achieved it so that people could recognize that, a great lawyer called Bankole Aluko passed through, but more importantly, that brand continues today to sustain.
Leading up to the time of his passing, what were some of the projects? I know you keep on emphasizing there was a lot of things that you were now putting in place. Could you share with us some of the systems or the initiatives that you are now employing?
I think, look, the reality is very few Nigerian law firms at that time were built on a true partnership. So historically, most Nigerian law firms were family-run businesses. So what was the message? The message was that we'd send our kids to school, they would come back as lawyers, they would take over, and typically, most of the law firms, the children took over. And there was a sense in the marketplace that lawyers are fungible. My view of life is that lawyers are not fungible. The fact that your father is a great lawyer doesn't necessarily mean that you would be a great lawyer or that you would continue to build a great law firm. So for us, I think that the project and the satisfaction of that project was essentially building the firm, but recognizing that it wasn't about us. It was about a team, and that team needed to be the very best that we could find, and that team needed to share from the profits of the firm, recognizing also, for instance, that a time would come where some of us would step back from the day-to-day management of the firm, which is essentially what has happened today. And I think for me, that was the key project. There are lots of transactions that we worked on, but I think the key signal that we sent to the market was our ability to achieve, our ability to do the things that come easily, maybe not easily in the sense of they happen by without effort, but they happen because we worked at it, they happened because we wanted it to happen, and that we gave it our all.
Now, let's look at the events leading up to this.
So from one phone call where he says to me, I can't make it into the office today, I picked up something rather innocuous, to our next phone call, which is, hey, he's actually not doing very well, he's at home, and I said, fine, I jump into the car, and I rush across to his house, only to find that, something that we thought was totally innocuous had taken him away. In a very short couple of days. It was great personal loss, great professional loss. But I'd like to also think that it was not just a loss for me. It was a greater loss to his family, to his children. But my reflection was really the fact that we had this law firm that we had jointly built. We needed to keep it together. We needed to make sure that it was sustaining. Needed to make sure that the people that worked with us understood that it was a huge loss, but it was one that we were going to live through. But it was also one that we would look back at and say to ourselves that if we hadn't done the things we did then, that in itself was a circumstance that could have destroyed all of us.
Was there ever a point that you felt that, when you found out about the loss, was there ever a point that you felt like this is the end of the firm, this is the end of everything we've built?
It did cross my mind. It did cross my mind.
What were you thinking exactly?
Well, look, it's, to give you an example, I have no litigation skills whatsoever. I practiced law, went to court a couple of times, but felt that it wasn't for me. The question was this a role I could pick up? I say to people today, some of the lawyers I respect the most are people who can do litigation and do corporate work. Well, that just wasn't for me. And so what I needed to do at that time was to make sure that the lawyers that worked with Bankole at that time felt that they were part of the firm. Not just that they were part of the firm, that they could deploy their skills, even though he wasn't here. And I'm happy to look back after all 15 years and say, today our firm not only is one of the biggest firms in the country, but within the firm today we have two senior advocates of Nigeria who were essentially people who worked with Bankole at that time. So that in itself is self-satisfaction of the fact that we did have vision because we did pick the right people to succeed us, but more importantly, that the firm itself lived through what I consider to be an extremely difficult period.
What do you think he would say if he saw what you've managed to build since his passing?
I think with a wry smile, and he wasn't a man of very many words. I think he would look at what we've built. He would look at the legacy we've built. He would look at the fact that people today remember the fact that he was a name partner, but that not just a name partner of 15 years ago, but a name partner of a firm today that has a legacy, has achieved much bigger than we were when he left. I think that in itself would be satisfaction of the fact that not only did he pick the right partners, but that he worked with the right people, and that that legacy is sustaining.
How did this experience shape your outlook in life?
Well, look, let me put it to you this way. Death has always been one of the things, it's a certainty. It's always been one of the things that I've always said to myself that, it's something that you have to deal with. I lost my father very, very early on. I was 12 years old when my father died. Over the years, I lost a son. I lost my partner at some point. So for me, I've always felt that if you ask me what are the real changes in my life, I would actually say to you that if you've experienced the death of people extremely close to you, that it does change you. The things that you have a realization that your time here is a bit more than just the frivolous, and more importantly, it pushes you to consistently perform. It pushes you day to day to deliver. Because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So for me, the fact that this happened essentially was a game changer, but it was one that I was willing to not just contemplate, but willing to deal with, pick up the pieces and move on.
You're seen as a role model for a lot of young people in the continent, not just Nigeria. If they're watching today, which we hope they are, what advice would you give them to follow in your footsteps?
Look, the advice for me, and I am pretty consistent about this, I spend a lot of time mentoring. I spend a lot of time sharing with people. I don't turn down an opportunity to speak to you, the younger generation. So what's the advice? The advice is, look, we all trip and we fall consistently. But the realization that you can pick yourself up and that you can achieve. I believe very, very strongly in the ability to make your own luck. I'm a firm believer in the fact that people are fortunate in life. But I also think that inherent in people being fortunate is the fact that you work hard to achieve. And so I don't take life lightly. I take every opportunity that is given to me as one that I'm blessed with. And I think that if you work 110% consistently every day, what's yours will come to you. That's the first thing. But secondly, and more importantly, if you work extremely hard, and if you have the targets that are therefore not necessarily for material advantage, but for the satisfaction of knowing that the efforts that you've put in are the best that you can give it. I think that what you achieve, you'll be happy with, you'll be satisfied with, and also there's a community feel. We live in a country where community and family is critical.
When you look back on your relationship with Aluko, if there was anything you could say, if there was any final words you could have given him, if you could, expect what happened, expect the unexpected, shall I say, what would be your last words or your final message that you would have wanted to give him?
Well, my final message, and this isn't something that I've thought of, but my final message would have been that would make him proud. And I think that what I see, the legacy today, is that we have made him proud. So today, when somebody walks into our office and they ask, so where's Mr. Aluko? And we tell them the story. The reality is that they wonder, but you could have changed the name of the firm. You could have evolved into something else. But for me, it was a promise. It was the legacy. It was important that we kept to that promise. It was important that we developed, the vision that we jointly shared. And so I think that would be what I would want to say to him, is that we would make you proud. And I think we have.
Thank you very much for sharing with us some amazing pearls of wisdom and your worst day.
Thank you.
Now you've heard from the gentleman himself, and now let's find out what some of his closest allies had to say about this remarkable legal mind.
The Access Bank story, particularly the period 2002 until he just retired recently in 2015, cannot be written without Gbenga Oyebode being very, very prominent.
A couple of things he had to do. First of all, his initial role was basically as a stabilizing force.
The key thing for me has always been his calmness under pressure, his ability to look beyond the immediate problem and say, how do we move on from here? How do we overcome that problem?
He had a much more difficult task, which was, how do you basically lift up this bank at that time with 2 billion naira capital to meet the minimum threshold of 25 billion naira.
What I admire most about Gbenga is that he's very kind, he's warm, he's a people's person, I don't know anybody that doesn't like Gbenga.
Some people dream of success, while other people get up every morning and make it happen. Success is the result of consistency, hard work, learning from failure, loyalty, and persistence. Now the question is, do you have what it takes to handle success when your worst day comes? My name is Hyde, and this is my worst day for Forbes Africa TV.